we may not be able to control everything in our outer world, but we certainly can control our inner world. And so it's not so important to not react. I mean, everybody reacts. I react. The question is, how long are you going to react?
That's the question. So we found out that when people react emotionally with anger, with antagonism, there's an arousal that takes place because you're turning on the sympathetic nervous system, and the sympathetic nervous system is a primitive system saying, Alex, whatever that is a threat to you. And if there's a threat, a good way to deal with a threat is to get aggressive. That's primitive. It's animal. It's very animal. Some people will say, oh my God, there's my ex. And instead of getting angry, they run. They flee. They're in fear. They're like, the fear is, I'm better just getting away. So fear causes them to run. Feel fear when they feel anger, when they feel pain. Those are the primary stimulators that switch on that sympathetic nervous system. And they used to say that it's automatic. It happens automatically. That's part of the autonomic nervous system, and you really don't have any control of it. Turns out that's absolutely not the truth. So first thing is learning how to shorten your response to the emotional reaction. So if you have an event that happens to your life, in your life, and I say, Alex, why are you so mad today? And you say, oh, it's because of this situation and this person, and this happened this way. And I would say, oh my gosh, do you mean that person or that circumstance is controlling the way you feel and the way you think? Now, anything that's controlling the way we feel and the way we think makes us victims, whatever that is. Now, that's okay, but if you keep that emotional reaction going on for hours or days, and I say to you, Alex, it's 5 days, what's up? And you say to me, I'm upset from something that happened to me 5 days ago, I'd say you have a mood. You're in a mood. Now, some people keep that same emotional reaction going on for weeks or months. And then I would say, well, Alex has a angry temperament. It becomes a temperament. If we keep it going now this is true, people keep this going for years on end. If it goes on for years, now it's a personality trait. So here's the weird part about it. You ask that person who's been angry for years why they're angry, and they'll recall an event from 10 years ago, or a series of events from 10 years ago. And the research on the memory says that 50% of that story isn't even the truth. They can't even remember the truth. They embellish the story and make it sound worse than it really was to excuse themselves from changing. Now, what we tell people is forget the event. Doesn't matter. The details of the event doesn't. What matters is learning how to overcome the emotion. So when you're sitting in a meditation and all of a sudden out of nowhere, your body starts getting aroused and it starts getting frustrated and it starts getting angry. And people say, I'm doing my meditation wrong. You know what I say to them? No, 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 no. You're doing it right. That has to come up. So when the anger and the frustration comes up and a person's in a meditation, they have one of two choices: to quit, which is what they've always done. But if you're sitting with 1,500 people and no one else is quitting, you're not going to quit. And if I teach you how to lower the volume to that emotion, and I teach you a way to change that, every time you settle the body back down into the present moment and lower the volume to that anger, that's a victory, because you're telling the body it's no longer the mind, that you're the mind. Now, it'll go, well, yeah, well, what about this circumstance? And what about that? And it'll get aroused again. And then you notice it, and instead of turning on the TV or getting on your cell phone or getting on the social media, you lower the volume again. Now, this is the work. It turns out every time you do that, that victory, you're telling the body that it's no longer the mind, that you're the mind, and then all of a sudden it wants to get up and go. It's busy, it's got things to do, and you become aware that it wants to do that, and you bring it back to the present moment. You're executing a will that's greater than the program. Now, it turns out if you do this enough times, sooner or later, the body surrenders. Sooner or later, the body acquiesces. It says, I'm no longer the mind. Alex is the mind. And when that occurs, there's a liberation of energy. That anger, that frustration, literally turns into energy. It's released into the field as information. Now, you return back into your life and you see the same person or the same circumstance, your response to them is going to be much less. Why? Because you took care of it within you. You're not trying to fix it out there. It's just that your response is different. So now, if you're no longer responding to the environment and your response to the environment isn't weakening the organism because stress depletes energy, then you're less susceptible to the environment.
Now you can understand that whether it's joyful or stressful, with every thought you think, every emotion you feel, and every event you experience, you're acting as an epigenetic engineer of your own cells. You control your destiny. So this raises another question. If your environment changes and you then program new genes in new ways, is it possible, based on your perceptions and beliefs, to program the gene ahead of the actual environment? Feelings and emotions are normally the end products of experiences. But can you combine a clear intention with an emotion that begins to give the body a sampling of the future experience before it's been made manifest? When you're truly focused on an intention for some future outcome, if you can make inner thought more real than the outer environment during the process, the brain won't know the difference between the two. Then your body, as the unconscious mind, will begin to experience the new future event in the present moment. You'll signal new genes in new ways to prepare for this imagined future event. If you continue to mentally practice enough times this new series of choices, behaviors, and experiences that you desire, reproducing the same new level of mind over and over again, then your brain will begin to physically change, installing new neurological circuitry to begin to think from that new level of mind, to look as if the experience has already happened. You'll be producing epigenetic variations that lead to real structural and functional changes in the body by thought alone. Just as do those who respond to a placebo, then your brain and body will no longer be living in the same past. They'll be living in the new future that you created in your mind. This is possible through mental rehearsal. This technique is basically closing your eyes and repeatedly imagining performing an action and mentally reviewing the future you want, all the while reminding yourself of who you no longer want to be, the old self, and who you do want to be. This process involves thinking about your future actions, mentally planning your choices, and focusing your mind on a new experience. Let's go over this sequence in greater detail so we can more thoroughly understand exactly what's happening in mental rehearsal and how it works. As you mentally rehearse a destiny or dream about a new outcome, you imagine it over and over again until it becomes familiar to you. The more knowledge and experience you have wired in your brain about the new reality you desire, the more resources you have to create a better model of it in your mental picturing. And so the greater your intention and expectation are, as with the hotel maids, you are reminding yourself of what your life will look like and feel like once you get what you want. Now you are putting an intention behind your attention. Then you consciously marry your thoughts and intentions with a heightened state of emotion, such as joy or gratitude. More on heightened states of emotion is coming up. Once you can embrace that new emotion and you get more excited, you're bathing your body in the neurochemistry that would be present if that future event were actually happening. It could be suggested that you're giving your body a taste of the future experience. Your brain and body don't know the difference between having an actual experience in your life and just thinking about the experience. Neurochemically, it's the same. So your brain and body begin to believe they're actually living in the new experience in the present moment. By keeping your focus on this future event and not letting any other thoughts distract you, in a matter of moments, you turn down the volume on the neural circuits connected to the old self, which begins to turn off the old genes, and you fire and wire new neural circuits, which initiates the right signals to activate new genes in new ways. Thanks to the neuroplasticity discussed previously, the circuits in your brain begin to reorganize themselves to reflect what you're mentally rehearsing. And as you keep coupling your new thoughts and mental images with that strong positive emotion, then your mind and body are working together and you're now in a new state of being. At this point, your brain and body are no longer a record of the past. They are a map to the future, a future that you've created in your mind. Your thoughts have become your experience, and you just became the placebo. A few mental rehearsal success stories. Maybe you heard that story a while back about a major who was imprisoned in a concentration camp in Vietnam, who mentally practiced playing golf on a particular course every day to keep himself sane, and like to shoot a perfect score when he was finally released and returned home. Or perhaps you've heard the account of Soviet human rights activist Anatoly Sharansky, later known as Nathan Sharansky, who spent more than 9 years imprisoned in the Soviet Union after being falsely accused of spying for the United States in the 1970s. Sharansky, who spent 400 days of his prison term in a small, darkened, freezing, cold punishment cell, played a game of mental chess against himself every day, keeping track of the board coordinates and the positions of each piece in his mind. This enabled Sharansky to maintain many of his neural maps, which normally require external stimulation to stay intact. After his release, he immigrated to Israel and eventually became an Israeli cabinet minister. When world chess champion Garry Kasparov came to Israel in 1996 to play a simultaneous chess match against 25 Israelis, Sharansky beat him. Aaron Rodgers, quarterback for the Green Bay Packers, also imagines moves in his head that he often later executes with precision on the field. Leading up to the Packers' 2011 Super Bowl win in a playoff game that the sixth-seeded Packers won 48-21 against the top-seeded Atlanta Falcons, Rodgers completed 31 of 36 passes, 86.1%, the fifth best postseason completion percentage of all time. In the sixth grade, a coach taught us about the importance of visualization. Rodgers told a sports reporter for USA Today, "When I'm in a meeting, watching film, or lying in bed before I go to sleep, I always visualize making those plays." A lot of those plays I made in the game I had thought about. As I made it on the couch, I visualized making them. Rodgers was also able to successfully spin out of 3 potential sacks in that game. Later noting about those plays, I visualized the majority before I made them. Countless other professional athletes have also used mental rehearsal to stunning effect, including golfer Tiger Woods, basketball stars Michael Jordan, Larry Bird, and Jerry West, and baseball pitcher Roy Halladay. Champion golfer Jack Nicklaus wrote in his book, "Golf My Way, I never hit a shot, even in practice, without having a very sharp, in-focus picture of it in my head. It's like a color movie. First, I see the ball where I want it to finish, nice and white and sitting up high on the bright green grass. Then the scene quickly changes, and I see the ball going there. Its path, trajectory, and shape, even its behavior on landing. Then there's sort of a fade out, and the next scene shows me making the kind of swing that will turn the previous images into reality. Only at the end of this short, private Hollywood spectacular do I select a club and step up to the ball." As we can see from these examples alone, and there are many, many more just like them, plenty of evidence shows that mental rehearsal is extremely effective for learning a physical skill with minimal physical practice. I can't resist adding one more example, this time from Jim Carrey, who tells an amazing story about what he did when he first came to Los Angeles in the late 1980s as a struggling actor looking for work. He'd written a paragraph, long affirmation on a piece of paper about meeting the right type of people, getting the right types of acting jobs, working on the right movie with the right casting, and being successful and contributing something worthwhile and making a difference in the world. He would go up to Mulholland Drive in the Hollywood Hills every night and lean back in his convertible and look up at the sky. He'd say that paragraph to himself, committing it to memory, as he imagined that what he was describing was actually happening. And he wouldn't drive back down from that Hollywood overlook until he felt as though he was the person he'd been imagining, until it felt real for him. He even wrote a check to himself for $10 million, penning for acting services rendered on it and dating it Thanksgiving 1995. He carried the check in his wallet for years. Finally, in 1994, 3 movies were released that made Carey a star. First, Ace Ventura. Pet Detective came out in February, followed by The Mask in July. And for his role in the third movie, Dumb and Dumber, released in December, Carey received a check for exactly $10 million. He created exactly what he'd envisioned for himself. What all of these individuals have in common is that they eliminated the external environment, got beyond their bodies, and transcended time so that they could make significant neurological changes within. When they presented themselves to the world, they were able to get their minds and bodies to work together, and they created in the material world what they'd first conceived in the mental realm. Scientific studies back this up. To start with, many experiments on mental rehearsal prove that when you concentrate on a particular region of the body, your thoughts stimulate the region in the brain that governs that part. And if you keep doing it, physical changes in the brain's sensory area will then follow. It makes sense because if you keep placing your awareness in the same place, you are firing and wiring the same networks of neurons. And as a result, you'll build stronger brain maps in that area. In a Harvard study, research subjects who'd never before played the piano mentally practiced a simple 5-finger piano exercise for 2 hours a day for 5 days, and made the same brain changes as the subjects who physically practiced the same activities, but without ever lifting a finger. The region of their brains that controls finger movements increased dramatically, allowing their brains to look as though the experience they'd imagined had actually happened. They installed the neurological hardware, circuits, and software programs, thereby creating new brain maps by thought alone. In another study of 30 people over a 12-week period, some regularly exercised their little fingers, while others just imagined doing the same thing. While the group that actually did the physical exercises increased the strength of their little fingers by 53%, the group that only imagined doing the same thing also increased the strength of their little fingers by 35%. Their bodies had changed to look as if they were having the physical experience in external reality over and over again, but they only experienced it in their minds. Their minds changed their bodies. In a similar experiment, 10 volunteers each imagined flexing one of their biceps as hard as they could 5 times a week. Researchers recorded the subject's electrical brain activity during the sessions and measured their muscle strength every 2 weeks. Those who only imagined flexing increased their bicep muscle strength by 13.5% in just a few weeks, and they maintained the gain for 3 months after the training stopped. Their bodies responded to a new mind. A final example is a French study that compared subjects who either lifted or imagined lifting dumbbells of different weights. Those who imagined lifting heavier weights activated their muscles more than did those who imagined lifting lighter weights. In all 3 of these studies on mental rehearsal, the subjects were able to measurably increase their body strength using only their thoughts. You may well wonder if studies exist showing what happens when we follow the entire sequence, when we not only imagine what we want to create, but also connect with strong positive emotion.
Welcome to join our free Telegram group of Dr. Joe Dispenza for free? Link in the comments. Bless you all.